Welcome back to BookTalker's English Learning Zone. In today's episode, we're diving into 20 must-know English words from 4 English-speaking countries: the USA, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. From everyday words to slang, we'll explore how the same word can have wildly different meanings across these places. Whether you're a beginner or advanced learner, this episode will help you understand these differences and sound more like a local. Let's get started.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the deep dive.
It's great to be back.
Today, we're going to be taking a look at this really fascinating material we've got, all about how certain English words can have wildly different meanings or equivalents across different English-speaking countries.
Yeah, you'd think English is English, right?
Right.
But the source material actually points out 20 really common words that just trip people up constantly.
Exactly. And it's not just about avoiding awkward moments or misunderstandings. It's also about appreciating how diverse and how rich English really is.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to give you a practical understanding. A shortcut, almost like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, like a linguistic cheat sheet.
So you can navigate conversations, media, anything really coming from the USA, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and just sound like you know what you're talking about.
And have a little fun with it, too.
Exactly, because some of these differences are just so quirky and unexpected. To make this as clear as possible, we're going to start with those basic everyday words where differences are really common.
The ones that kind of make you scratch your head.
Exactly. And then we'll move on to some regional terms, things that are very specific to certain places. And then finally, we'll delve into some slang and expressions, which is always my favorite part.
Oh, yeah, it's where the language really comes alive.
It does.
And at the very end, we've got a little challenge for you to kind of test out your newfound knowledge and maybe even have a bit of a laugh.
Okay, so let's imagine you're in a building and you need to go up a few floors. What do you look for?
In the U.S., you'd look for the elevator.
Right, but if you were in the UK, Australia, or New Zealand, you'd actually be looking for the
lift.
Real quick, if you're enjoying this, make sure to hit that subscribe button.
The lift.
It's such a simple word, but it's a classic example of how things can differ.
And I think it's interesting how the word lift really reflects that original idea of being
lifted up?
Yeah, literally lifted upward.
Yeah, like a platform being lifted.
Now let's talk about something that can lead to some real confusion, especially when you're hungry: chips.
Ah, yes, the great chip debate.
In the U.S., when you say chips, you're thinking about those crispy potato snacks in a bag.
What we in the U.K. and often in Australia would call crisps.
But in the U.K. and Australia, if you ask for chips,
you're going to get a plate of what Americans call fries.
Right, so if you're craving what Americans call chips in the U.K., make sure you ask for crisps.
Otherwise, you might be in for a surprise.
And speaking of tasty treats, let's talk about that sweet baked good we often enjoy with a glass of milk. In the U.S., it's a cookie.
And in the U.K., it's a biscuit.
Again, same thing, different name.
It makes you wonder how these differences even came about, right?
It really does. Okay, so we've covered some everyday basics. Now let's move on to some regional words, things that are very specific to certain places and can really give you a feel for the local culture.
These are the words that you might not encounter right away, but as you start to immerse yourself in the language, you'll hear them more and more.
Absolutely. So let's start with a place where many of us spend a fair bit of time: the mall.
In the U.S., that's the go-to spot for shopping and entertainment. But in the U.K. and Australia, you'd be more likely to head to a shopping center.
And what's interesting is that our sources suggest that in Australia, going to the shopping center can be a bigger deal, almost a social event.
More so than just popping into the mall in the U.S.
It's like the shopping center plays a different role in the community.
Yeah, almost like a community hub.
Now, shifting our focus to New Zealand, there's a term for a convenience store that I always find so charming: dairy.
It's such a unique word. It's basically the equivalent of a corner store in the U.S.
So if you hear someone in New Zealand saying they're going to the dairy, don't picture cows and milk.
They're just popping out for some snacks and essentials.
Exactly. And speaking of regional terms that might sound a bit unexpected, let's talk about vehicles. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, you might hear someone talking about their ute.
A ute is simply a pickup truck, but it's such a common term in those countries, especially in rural areas.
It's almost like a symbol of a certain lifestyle.
Yeah, like a rugged, practical vehicle that's perfect for the Aussie or Kiwi landscape.
All right, so we've explored some regional vocabulary now for the fun part. Let's dive into some slang and expressions.
This is where things get really interesting.
It is, because understanding slang can really help you connect with people on a more informal level.
And it's often where you'll encounter the most humor and personality in the language.
So let's start with a word that has a very different meaning in the UK compared to the US, fancy.
If someone in the UK says, "I fancy a cup of tea," they're simply saying they would like a cup of tea.
But in the US, fancy usually implies something a bit more elaborate or expensive.
Right, you might describe a restaurant as fancy, but you wouldn't say you fancy a quick snack.
It's a good example of how the same word can have very different connotations depending on where you are.
Now let's head over to Australia. If someone there tells you they're feeling crook, what do you think it means?
Well, according to our sources, it simply means they're feeling sick.
It's a common piece of Aussie slang that might sound a bit strange to other English speakers.
But once you know what it means, it's easy to understand.
And finally, let's travel to New Zealand for a phrase that I absolutely love, sweet as.
Sweet as is such a versatile expression. It can mean great, no problem, fantastic.
It's like a catch-all phrase for anything positive.
And it just sounds so laid back and friendly, which I think really reflects the Kiwi spirit.
I agree. So now that we've covered all these fascinating variations, it's time to put your knowledge to the test.
That's right, it's challenge time.
We want you to get creative and try to construct a sentence that uses at least one word from each of the 4 countries we've discussed: the USA, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand.
Think back to all the words we've covered. Elevator lift, chips, crisps, cookie, biscuit, mall, shopping center, dairy, fancy, crook, sweet as.
The possibilities are endless.
So let your imagination run wild. Maybe you're going to the shopping center to pick up some crisps and biscuits because you're feeling a bit crook and you need a lift home in your mate suit.
Or perhaps you're feeling sweet, as because you just scored some tickets to a concert at the mall and you fancy grabbing a cookie and a cuppa before the show.
Say your sentence out loud or write it down and see what you come up with.
And if you're feeling brave, share it with us on social media. We'd love to see what you create.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into English language, variations, remember that these differences are what make the language so rich and interesting.
It's not about being perfect or speaking one correct version of English.
It's about understanding and appreciating the nuances and the diversity of the language.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's how we learn.
Exactly. So keep listening, keep learning, and keep exploring the wonderful world of English.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you. As you continue your language journey, think about how even seemingly simple words can carry different cultural weight or emotional connotations in different English-speaking communities.
It's a fascinating area to explore, and it can really deepen your understanding of not just the language, but also the cultures it represents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So until next time, happy language learning.